Welcome to Cause and Effect, the podcast for senior charity leaders who want to make a difference without losing themselves or burning out. I'm Alex Nunn, a psychologist with 20 years experience in the charity sector, and each week I'll be bringing you practical, evidence-based tools and honest conversations to help you live well and lead well. Let's get started. Welcome to Cause and Effect, the podcast for charity leaders who want to live and lead well. I'm Alex Nunn, a psychologist with 20 years experience in the charity sector, and I'm really excited you're here. Before we get into the episodes proper though, I wanted to record this one first because I think it really matters that you understand why this podcast exists and why I believe it's needed. I want to ask you a question. When did you last finish a working week feeling like you've done what you actually set out to do? Not just survived it, not just got through the endless to-do list and the things that landed on your desk and all the back-to-back meetings, but genuinely led in a way that felt strategic and purposeful and in a way that felt like you. If you're struggling to remember, you're not alone, and that's exactly why I'm here. In the 20 years I've spent working in the charity sector, I've watched something happen time and time again that I think we need to talk about more honestly and more openly. What I've seen is that the people who are most committed to making a difference, the people who care most deeply about the work, are often the ones who are suffering the most. And not because they're weak, not because they're not good enough, and certainly not because they're not resilient enough, but because the sector they've given themselves to is in many ways set up to consume them. And I don't think that's acceptable. I think we can do better, and I think it starts with the leadership and the culture of an organisation. The charity sector brings together a very particular set of conditions that, when they combine, create a perfect storm for burnout. The first is the nature of the work itself. The work is important, it's meaningful, and the needs you're responding to are real and urgent and deeply important. The beneficiaries and communities you exist to serve are real people. You're not hitting quarterly targets, you're not selling products, you're trying to make people's lives better. Often the lives of people who have very few other options. And so the weight of that work is real, and it doesn't switch off at 5 o'clock. The second is the reality of the environment and the sector you're working in. Most, if not all of you, are doing more with less. And that's been happening for years. And the sector has long been asked to fill the gaps left by statutory services with a fraction of the funding and none of the infrastructure to support it. And so for many leaders, especially in smaller charities, this means covering multiple roles. CEO, fundraiser, HR lead, comms manager. The job description bears almost no resemblance to the actual job, and the demands placed upon you are much greater than the resource. And the third, and this is the one that doesn't get talked about enough, is what you're bringing to it. You didn't end up in this sector by accident. You're here because you care, because the work aligns with who you are and what you value. Because making a difference isn't just what you do. For many of you, it's a significant part of who you are. And that is a beautiful thing. But under the right conditions, it's also something very dangerous. Because when our work feels like a calling, it's very hard to set it down. It's very hard to switch off, and it's very difficult to hold it lightly. When your identity is tied up in what you do, saying no feels like betrayal of the cause, of the people who need you, of yourself. And so you keep going and going until you can't. And this is borne out in the research, with some recent research finding that up to 78% of charity workers feel emotionally exhausted or burnt out at least sometimes. Think about that for a moment. Nearly 4 in 5 people in our sector are struggling. That's a crisis, and we need to do something about it because it's not sustainable. And the best place to start is with our leaders, not because the rest of the organisation isn't important, but because as leaders you set the culture. And if we're going to address burnout for the staff, we have to make sure that you're fit for purpose first, that you are ready and capable of leading that work. And here's what I know from working with senior leaders. By the time burnout fully arrives, there's no quick fix. Recovery takes time, sometimes a lot of time, and time is something the sector can't afford to lose, and it's time that you can't get back. But the thing that troubles me most isn't burnout itself. It's that so many leaders wait until they're in crisis before they seek support, because somewhere along the way, they've absorbed the idea that needing help is a sign of weakness, that struggling is just part of the job, this is just how the sector is, and that if we push through, we'll get on top of it. That elusive quiet period will come and we'll finally get to the bottom of the to-do list and on with the strategic work. And that doesn't just impact you as a leader. It impacts your teams, it impacts the organisation, it ripples it outwards. But I want to offer a different idea. What if the most important work you can do for yourself, for your team, and for your beneficiaries is to invest in how you lead before you hit the wall? Not as something that's a luxury, not as something that's a nice to have, not as something to get on when things are quieter, but as a fundamental part of how you do the job. Prevention isn't just better than cure. In leadership, I believe it's the only strategy that actually works. Because by the time you're burning out, your decision making is compromised, your relationships are strained, your team is suffering alongside you, and the people you exist to serve are feeling it as well. All of these things are connected. And so that's why this podcast exists. But I want to be honest with you about what it is and what it isn't. This podcast isn't going to be about productivity hacks or time management systems. It isn't going to tell you to try a morning routine or download a meditation app or just learn to switch off. You've heard all of that already and you've tried it. And if it had worked, you wouldn't be here. What I've learned is the reason that advice often doesn't stick isn't because you haven't tried hard enough or because you haven't persevered with it. It's because it doesn't go deep enough. The patterns that keep you stuck, the overworking, the difficulty letting go of things and delegating, the worries that constantly pop up in the middle of the night, the feeling that you're never quite doing enough, the guilt that comes with that, aren't just poor working habits. They're rooted in your beliefs, in your values, and how you understand what it means to be a good leader, a good person, and someone who cares. And so we need to address that at a deeper level. And if we don't, those thoughts, those feelings, those patterns of work won't change and the cycle will continue. This podcast is going to go to that level, and we're going to look at how you can think differently about work so you can make the changes you want to. Each episode will take one of the challenges that leaders are facing, whether that's firefighting or the feeling of being an imposter, to a sense of isolation, burnout, or the feeling of losing yourself in the work. And we'll explore that what that means for you and for the organisation. And within that, I will share practical evidence-based tools and approaches that you can put into practice. So it will be small habits, small questions you can ask yourself, small shifts in your perspective that over time can create real change for you, for your teams, and the way you work. So this podcast is for you if you are a charity leader who wants to feel more grounded and in control, who wants to create the headspace so you can actually lead strategically rather than feel like you're constantly reacting, who wants to understand yourself and your organisation better and to build a way of working that doesn't cost you and your teams everything. It's for you whether you're right at the edge of burnout or nowhere near it and determined to stay that way, whether you're a new CEO finding your feet or a seasoned leader who's wondering when work suddenly got so hard. And it's for you if you believe, just like I do, that charities should be brilliant places to work, places that add to your life, not drain it. And that starts with you. So, episode 1 is up next, and we are starting with the topic of firefighting because it's one of the most universal experiences I hear about from leaders, and because understanding it can really set the foundation for so much of what needs to follow. So, I'd love to connect with you. You can find me over on LinkedIn and Instagram. Come and say hi, and let's get started. Thanks so much for listening to Cause and Effect. If today's episode resonated, I'd love to connect. You can find me over on LinkedIn and Instagram. And if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and share with your friends and colleagues. See you next week.